Hi everybody, it's Sarah Cray with Let's Make Art, and I love to watercolor, and I'm just putting some videos together just to give you some more information on materials, techniques, supplies, just to go along with our weekly tutorials that we provide to you guys every week for free. So in this video, we're just gonna go over a couple little tips and tricks that I have found worked for me along the way. First thing I wanna talk about is so I get some questions in terms of pencils and drawing things out. Most of the time I use graphite paper to transfer images. If I'm doing portraits or any kind of commission work where it is portraiture, whether animal or person, I like to actually trace the picture using graphite paper onto my watercolor paper. And I'll show you how that works really quick. So what you would want to do with graphite paper, you do dark side down, and then any mark you make, it's going to show up on your paper, just like that. So if I had a photocopy of a paper, I would put it over this, and then I would just, trace the lines, and whatever shape I'm making, when I'm done tracing all the lines, it's going to show up on my paper. So that's just a really fun, easy tool to transfer images. The drawback of that, however, is that watercolor is transparent. So these pencil lines you will see through the watercolor paper. Now, I like to use a kneaded eraser. Sometimes after I kind of draw something out using graphite paper and I don't want the lines to be too dark, I just take my eraser and just kind of rub over it. It's not going to get rid of the line completely, but it is going to lighten it up. Now, the reason why I like these rubber erasers is because they actually don't tear out the paper. Most regular papers, in order to erase the line, they actually just kind of tear out that paper, and that's why that graphite line is gone. This one, it actually just lifts the graphite and it leaves the paper alone, which is important in watercolor because you want your paper to stay intact. Now, if you are doing florals or you're freehanding something and you kind of want to draw it out to give you an idea, but you don't want these strong pencil lines, what I would suggest doing and what I use is I actually use a watercolor pencil. So watercolor pencils are really wonderful in the way that they're like a regular colored pencil, but once water hits them, it kind of smooths out. So I actually use a gray watercolor pencil. I loosely and softly draw my shape, and then once water hits that pencil mark, it actually blends away, and you can't even see that original pencil line. So if you just want to use something to give you a general shape or an idea, then watercolor pencils are a really great tool to use for that. Because like I said, regular pencils, you will see that pencil line through the watercolor because it is transparent. And once water hits that pencil line, you can't erase it. So if that is frustrating you, there's ways around it. Now, the other thing I kind of just want to go over really quick is that sometimes we'll get, while we're painting, we're rinsing our brush, we're going crazy, we're having a good time, everybody's laughing, and you get like a drop on your paper of color. And you're like, no, what do I do? My painting's ruined. Don't fret. While it's still wet, take your paper towel, just suck that baby right up. That's it. Sometimes we get water drops and we are so upset that we don't do anything about it because we're not sure what to do. And if you just work quickly and calmly, you can just get rid of those drops, no problem. So if I have a drop right there, just make sure your paper towel is clean, and you're just gonna suck that baby right up. You might still have a little bit of a color, but if you just kind of lighten it, it should be okay. Now we can do that same thing, like let's say the mark is a little bit darker, like that, and you're like, what do I do? How do I get rid of this off my paper? Well, one thing that you can do is you can add clean water on top of it, and then take your paper towel and try and lift it. And maybe, let's see if we can do that one more time to lighten it at all. So that's probably as light as we're going to get that one, but that's still lighter than it was. So sometimes that's the way to go. And if you actually have one of these at home, a Mr. Clean Magic Eraser is totally magical and it would erase that mark. I'm so mad at myself for leaving mine at home because I was going to show you, but I do it in some of the tutorials on our site. But basically, if you have a Magic Clean, what you want to do is I like to rip off a piece. We're going to pretend that this is a Magic Clean eraser. You rip off a piece of the sponge, you dip it in clean water. It has to be clean. And then you are going to softly rub that color off. If you rub really hard, it's going to destroy the paper and you're going to create a hole, or you might even make the mark worse. So you want to start off really lightly, almost like picking up the color, and then eventually maybe softly rubbing it. But the thing that's important with that Mr. Clean Magic Eraser is that the eraser part is clean and that you are using clean water to pick it up. So that has saved me many a times when I'm painting original artwork and I get a little paint fleck somewhere and I want that gone. Whip out that Mr. Clean, you're going to be good to go. Okay, so the last thing I kind of want to go over is we've talked about texture and we've talked about how dropping in color and dropping in water can get you some really cool texture lines going on. But sometimes in your painting you get a texture line where you really just don't want it. So I'm going to bring back my little texture paper, and here I dropped in some water, so I have some really cool texture lines going on right here. But in some areas, depending on what we're painting, the texture lines can actually kind of take away from the painting or be a little bit too distracting. So something that you can do is you can just blend it out. So to blend something out is you're just going to take your brush. You want to make sure it's clean, not any color on it. You're going to get it wet, but you don't want it dripping. You're going to kind of hit it off the side, maybe even a little on your paper towel to get rid of that excess water. And then I'm just going to move my paintbrush back and forth and just try and soften up some of these lines. So I'm just taking my brush, moving it back and forth. And some of those texture lines are already softening up and disappearing. Now, I'm not going to be able to get rid of the line completely because watercolor usually, the longer it dries, the harder it is to pick up. So, but you can mess with it. You can, kind of soften it. So that hard texture line that was there is no longer really there. And that's just because I used a damp brush. I worked it back and forth, kind of blended it out. That is very handy to have, to know if you want to blend out those hard lines. Now, another really great thing that you can do, let's say that you're painting something and you want to put a color down and you're like, oh no, that color is just way too dark. I want to lighten it up. Well, one way to lighten it up is you just put clean water on it, take your paper towel and just pick it up. And now I have a light blue leaf instead of a dark blue. So those are just some little tips and tricks that will kind of help you. I know that watercolor can seem really scary because you're like, oh, it's so permanent. Like with acrylic and oil, if you make something you don't like, you can just paint over it because once it dries, it does that. Watercolor, you don't really have that same sense of freedom. However, there are these little tricks that you can use to manipulate your painting to get it to where you want it to be. So the biggest thing to keep in mind is to stay calm, okay? It's not a big deal. It's paper, it's water, it's paint, it's gonna be fine. Just stay calm, work a little bit quickly, and you can totally blend, you can lift, you can erase some mistakes to where they're not really problems anymore. So hopefully that is helpful to you guys. Thank you so much for watching this. If you're interested, we have other videos going over materials, going over techniques, going over color theory, and of course we have our weekly paint along that we do every week, a project. So tune into those, and thank you for watching. Bye.